Can anybody hear me?
Yes, Jim. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I'd like to welcome everyone to another in-person and virtual meeting. Board members and town staff should be visible on your video. I'd also like to remind board members of two things. Please mute your microphones while you are not speaking, and please do not use the WebEx chat function. This virtual meeting will have a public comment period. The time limit for public comment will remain 3 minutes. If you plan to make public comment this evening, please open the participants list, hover over your name, click the raise your hand button. By following these steps, town staff will see that you would like to make public comment, and you will be permitted to do so. If necessary, town staff is prepared to confirm and attempt to resolve any technical issues. If you are having technical problems and are unable to meaningfully participate in this meeting, please email Robert Bishop. His email address is rbishop@tomv.org, and Robert's email is also listed on tonight's meeting agenda. We appreciate your patience during these different formats. As with any of our in-person meeting, our hope is that we create a friendly and respectful atmosphere for public dialogue. I call to order this regular meeting of the Monument Board of Trustees, Monday, July 20th, 2020. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Hogan, will you take roll, please?
Mayor Wilson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Here.
Trustee Clark? Noted absent. Trustee LeKind?
Here.
Trustee Romanello?
Here.
Here. Trustee Stevens?
Here.
Trustee Unruh?
Here.
Okay, we have before us a consent agenda. I would like to make one modification prior to the approval of the agenda. I would like to move resolution 5B to item number 8, board authorization items. And we'll make that 8B if the board is in agreement.
I approve the agenda as amended.
Is there? Second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Unruh?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee LeKind?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Romanello?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. First item on the agenda, presentations, Veterans Memorial Project, Mr. Michael Carlson. You can just kind of stay in the middle here. Yeah. So, and it's full dais, so if it's easier to stand by one of the videos, you can.
So, next slide, please. So the reason I'm doing a Veterans Memorial, I'm very involved with the VFW and the VFW Auxiliary. I'm a member in the VFW Auxiliary. My dad is a Vietnam vet. He was a ranger. And my grandpa was a B-26 radio operator in World War II on a plane called Flak B. Next slide, please. So the project in general is $40,000. It is for our downtown cemetery. The main look is to be a semicircle with a retaining wall around it to reduce the messiness of it, make sure the maintenance is good on it. It's a the headstone itself is $25,000. It was donated to us by Swan Law Funeral Company. It's about 2.5 feet tall, and we'll have the following quote. Only two defining forces have ever offered to die for you, Jesus Christ and the American soldier. One died for your soul and the other died for your freedom. The stone itself has a mountain range on top that looks just like Mount Hermon. On the sides, it has tall pine trees. For it, we're going to be having coins that we sent a letter to the president to see if he can donate them. They will be the 6th Armed Forces coins. All of them will be in order from top to bottom from services that I made sure were correct in order. Plaque will be installed into the memorial, honoring those who donated a lot of money to us and helped with much of the research and stuff. The VFW is one of the main organizations. They donated $10,000 in total, $9,000 from grant money, and the local post here gave us $1,000. The plaque will be installed on the side with the Battlefield's cross. Next slide, please. Which is in the bottom right. The memorial is in the top left, and what it will look like is in the top right. That's the main layout without the bench part behind it. The bottom left picture is a picture of what the retaining wall will look like. It's got a more nice feel to it. The battlefield cross itself is $5,000 and stands about 3 feet tall. The semicircle from the flagpole to the retaining wall will be 7 feet, so in total it will be 14 feet wide. And the pad, as shown in the picture in the bottom left, will have a cobblestone outline and a really nice looking center part. The memorial will fit well with the surroundings of the cemetery. Next slide, please. So we figured up with a timeline. Our first date is the land prep that the town and monument is actually doing for us. I contacted Mr. Foreman today, and he said we should have it done by August 20th. The concrete footers for the monument and statue will be done a couple days after that. After that, we will install the stone bases, which were given to us for about $200, that are about 18 inches tall. They will be put on about 5-6 days after the footers have dried and gotten done well. The full day of work we're planning on having be the 29th and 30th of August. That will give time for us to get all the stone laid and make sure it looks nice and get the stone cut. We plan on installing the headstone and hopefully the statue on September 12th, and the ceremony is to be determined will be around October 3rd. That is it.
I would just like to clarify, how much money have you raised?
With like the headstone itself being donated and stuff.
All funds and in-kind funds.
We've raised about $39,000.
And you're estimating it to cost around $40,000. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Jackson Creek Widening Project, Mr. Foreman.
Okay, just want to update y'all on the Jackson Creek widening project. As you're aware, Jackson Creek Parkway was completed from Baptist Road to Higbee Road to expand it from a 2-lane undivided road to a 4-lane divided segment. The section of Jackson Creek Parkway from Higbee to 105 is the responsibility of the town of Monument. I updated y'all a few months ago on this. The segment is a 2-lane undivided road that needs repair and widening. With the approval of village development in 2020, an increased amount of traffic will soon begin to use this section of Jackson Creek Parkway. We will receive in 2020 $800,000 in funding from PPACG with a required match of nearly 20%. This funding will be used to complete the design phase for the widening of Jackson Creek Parkway. In July of 2022, there's another $800,000 available for construction from PPACG with another 20% match requirement. The cost of construction is estimated to be near $10 million, including the design cost. We expect developer participation in additional PPACG funding, but we still forecast a shortfall in funding. Over a requirement for using the funding from PPACG requires that the project be completed within 10 years. This would require the project to be completed by 2030 or 2031, and we will work with developers and other funding agencies for additional funding mechanisms such as public improvement districts for the surrounding developments to participate in the help with funding the widening of Jackson Creek Parkway. Currently, we spend about $10,000 a year on repairs of Jackson Creek Parkway. So be glad to answer any questions that you have on my update.
Questions from the board?
Yes, we do have that covered.
Is it possible to do this over, like you said, 10 years? I hate to
Yeah.
drag that out.
I'm not sure what the citizens would feel about that, but or the board, but our goal is to get it done as quickly as possible. We want to get the design done. As soon as we get the design completed, then come back to you and say, here's what we think the exact cost is going to be and see where we go with funding from there. And we'll be talking about this again during the budget session.
Any other?
No, you just answered my question.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll move on. North Monument Creek Interceptor Project update, Mr. Tharnish.
Is this close enough? Okay, I actually have two presentations for the board tonight, and they're going to kind of loop together as I go through them. I don't know whether I'm going to stop and say that's the end of this. You'll be able to see that happen. North Monument Creek Interceptor Project update. A little background. The North Monument Creek Interceptor Project consists of a gravity sewer interceptor running from south to north along the I-25 corridor from the planned Air Force Academy Visitors Complex up north to two regional wastewater plants, the Upper Monument Creek. And if you remember from previous discussions over the years, the Upper Monument Creek is a wastewater plant that receives their wastewater from the Triview Metropolitan District, the Forest Lakes Metro District, and the Donala Water and Sand District. That is the plant that is just south of Baptist Road that borders the Air Force Academy. The plant in contention here is the Tri-Lakes wastewater plant. That is the plant that is at the end of Mitchell Avenue, and it takes the wastewater from the town of Monument, or I should say the Monument Sand District, Palmer Lake Sanitation District, and the Woodmore Water and Sanitation. Each of those plants is owned by three separate entities in a joint authority. So the project is headed up by Colorado Springs Utilities, for the planned Air Force Academy Visitor Center. All 6 of those systems are in talks with Colorado Springs Utilities to move this project forward. And at the end, the intent would be to decommission several lift stations that Colorado Springs Utility currently operates. Again, a lift station is only because the sewer, wherever they're taking the sewer from, can't gravity flow to the plant, so they have to. That's what lift stations are all about. And then also the part of this plan would be to decommission both of the regional wastewater plants, one here at the end of town and the one south of Baptist Road. But that would be up to those respective plant owners as to how they do that timing. Right now, the schedule that came out about a week ago from Colorado Springs Utilities they'll be at a point to start construction in October of 2022. And scheduled completion is now November of 2023. So if you look at that, it's about a little over a year for them to construct several miles of pipeline, sewer pipeline. Now, where we come in to this is in the water industry. Once all this water that goes through everybody's indoor plumbing gets used and turns into wastewater, the state allows you to recapture all of that water and use to what they call use to extinction. You can use it over and over and over until it goes away. Now, originally, I came to this board, I'm guessing 4 or 5 years ago, and we had a plan to build a state-of-the-art reclamation plant where we were going to take that wastewater that was treated to higher than a stream standard, which is not drinking water, but it cleaned a pretty high standard. And we were going to put that into a new treatment plant to turn it into drinking water. And that was our plan. Part of the reason why we bought that land at the corner of Synthes and Mitchell was to build this very expensive treatment plant. And as time went by, of course, in our industry, every year things change. And one of the things that changed was the whole Colorado Springs Utilities North Monument Creek Interceptor. What that meant to us was now that clean wastewater that we were going to grab from the end of Mitchell is now going to be 13 miles downstream at a Colorado Springs Utilities wastewater. So that became a problem not only for us, but for Woodmore Water and Sanitation, for Triview, and for the other water entities that would have utilized that water. So they have gotten together over the last year and drafted a pretty decent plan, and been in talking with Colorado Springs Utilities for the last year, maybe year and a half, about how can we get those return flows back. And we're at the point now where there is a plan, and there is a group put together of the northern entities here, and we call ourselves the Northern Regional Water Delivery System. That's what it's going to be called. And it's going to consist of water from a tank within Colorado Springs Utilities system. It's currently located at Highway 83 and Northgate, and run a pipeline through the south end of the Black Forest, through Triview's district, and end up on Higbee Road, and eventually end up in our system on Old Denver Road. It's a long pipeline, but with 4 entities in it, the cost is based upon the amount of water that people would take. So out of the 4 entities right now, our cost would be the lowest of all of them because we have the lowest demand. Since we started this process of looking into the design, there was a contract brought before the board that allowed us to participate, and I can't remember the exact dollar amount. I think it was somewhere around 17,000 for that number. And that was for all 4 of us to pitch in to get a preliminary study done. Now the preliminary study is in phase 1, and phase 1 is almost complete. And phase 1 basically allows us to look at what capacities could be in a potential pipeline route, and would it be cost effective for us to do that. And so far, a route has been established, at least on paper. The feasibility numbers look very good, a lot cheaper than if we would have had to build a plant to process this. And also, by default, it allows us to form an interconnection with all four entities up here. Physically be connected by pipes ranging from 24-inch to 16-inch, depending on where you're connected. Now, right now, it's still in phase one. Once it's moved on to phase two, that will include a lot of what they call delivery agreements. That's where the whole connexus of forming an authority or whatever the group's going to be called, and then agreements will come before the board to get signed so everybody knows what our commitments are, both from an infrastructure standpoint and from a monetary standpoint. And then they'll eventually go on to the final two phases, which are permitting and final design, and then bidding and construction. Now, I would expect that a timeline associated with this project will follow fairly close to what the NMCI project is tracking. So realistically, it is July of 2020. We're looking at probably 2 years. It could be a little sooner depending when agreements are signed. And then we'll be into the same type of scenario where we'll do a construction bid and purchase any right-of-way that needs to be purchased and surveys done and basically the meat of the whole project. And then hopefully completion should be fairly close to these guys, which would be the late 2023. But again, we haven't set a timeline for the Northern Region delivery system yet. But when we do, I will bring that to the board for your review. So any questions on the NMCI project or the Northern Regional Water Delivery System? Right into water system update. Water system update. I have been working on this for the last several weeks, and I've decided that the best way to present this to you is to split it into two areas. And the first thing I'm going to talk about are projects that are funded by and in the Water Enterprise Fund budget. These are capital, large money projects. And then the second part will be the 2A projects, which is that separate 2A fund. The first one I'll update you on is the Water Enterprise Fund project, well number 9, radium removal project. Right now, that is on schedule. It's scheduled to be 90% design completed to submit to the state by September of this year. We got about another month and a half at the latest. It could go sooner if Forsgren finishes their work on it sooner. We know that, and they know also that this is one of our highest priority projects. The construction for that project should begin in late December of this year or early January. Again, if we can get it started this year, we will. Being that it's budgeted for this year, we would prefer it start, but if it delays into January for weather reasons or other reasons, then we'll carry that over into 2021. The construction contract award would be scheduled for mid-February of next year, because we tend to put large projects like that out to bid 2 to 3 weeks. Give a week to review, and then we'll come to the board with a construction award, a contract that you would approve at that time. Scheduled completion right now would be August of 2021. Hopefully, again, if we can get it done mid or early summer, that would benefit us a little better than what it's scheduled for. And these are built in with a 4-month delay with the state. I have seen things move through the state at maybe 2 months, so I'm hoping that we don't need 4 months and just 2. And of course, every step that comes in ahead of schedule, we will move up the whole schedule up. And again, it could be moved up depending on the CDPHE approval, and CDPHE being the state's version of water approvals. one thing I want to just remind you of, when we sent out the radium removal, we had the engineers look at all possible methods that are currently in the industry to help remove or reduce the radium. And they ended up finding a total of 6 different methods that they presented to us in a tech memo. And they put everything into a matrix and scored everything based on radium disposal, chemical addition, experience, how many other towns or water systems use that type of system, the water efficiency, capital cost, and O&M cost. And the method that we chose that makes the most sense for us is called absorption. What that means is it's a type of filter media that will totally remove the radium ion from the water. The problem with the others, or what they call ion exchange and other various methods, those tend to reduce the amount, but once they get saturated, you have to backwash them or reverse the flow and wash all that trapped radium, and it ends up going into the wastewater system. And in the state of Colorado, there's a system called TNORM, technologically enhanced, I think it's naturally occurring materials, something like that. Anyway, wastewater purveyors then have to approve, knowing that they're going to receive that wastewater and figure out, can they process it out of their system or not. There's a lot of risk involved when you go down that path. When we pursued this, Monument Sand District basically had no interest in receiving any TNORM from us at all. And I would imagine that's because they're not equipped for that, and they could have some issues in the future, especially when they're trying to send their wastewater down to Colorado Springs Utility. So we opted to remove it ourselves. And when we get out for construction, we'll talk more about the money side of that. But this is probably the most efficient way to remove it. And on the matrix scoring of the 6 different systems that I have, this one scored almost the highest. The only thing higher than this was a method called blocking the well screens down in the hole. They could do some special testing and find out where in your well is this radium occurring. They could try to fit some special things to block it off. But the risk with that is it could move. Then what happens? Now your project started all over and you have to find how to block it again. Again, that was the cheapest thing to do, but also the most risky. So the absorption method is the one that they're working on right now with the state to get that approved. And when that happens, I will update the board. Next project in our water system update is the well or water treatment plant number 7 plant modifications. That currently is out for bid for construction as we speak. The bid opening is scheduled for August 13th. And that current timeline has us with that project complete and operational before the end of the year. So that's good news on that part. That's one well that even if we get the bids back, we may have the constructor wait a week or 2 until we get out of our high demand period. Right now, with current situation, we have to run that well almost nonstop. But we'll coordinate when somebody's awarded that. Next major project that's on the agenda or on the budget for this year was the Raspberry Lane distribution. As it turns out, that project is turning in to be a little more complicated than both the previous 2. Construction-wise, it's pretty straightforward. It's currently in the design phase. Once the design is complete, we're at a point where we're probably going to pause because, one, I feel we're going to need to do some neighborhood meetings, because we're pretty much going to destroy that road that's there already, and that road is already more narrow than the standard road in our town. And we're going to be cutting off access to people's driveways for extended periods of time. Putting a new main in there, we're going to have to retap all 48 connections in that neighborhood to the new main. So that project basically going to have to be done in phases. And I think if we have the design done and we know what the construction is going to cost over this fall, we'll have at least one meeting with the neighborhood, and we'll have one final one in the spring. and then we'll go out to bid. And once we get a bid, we'll have to coordinate everything with timing, running temporary water lines to keep people in service while the water main is being changed out. So it's turned into a little more of a PR and a neighborhood type thing where we don't want to rush this one. We could have a whole lot of people out of service if we're not careful. So we're going to pursue that up to that point, and then we'll be looking at that's one project. The construction wise will probably roll into the early next year. And for the enterprise fund, those are the major projects. There are a couple others that are in the budget as far as valve replacement and water main replacement. Valve replacement, we're looking at bids right now to do many of those as the budget will allow. Water main replacement, we're not going to make much progress on because the budget, when the budget cuts came through last year, the final budget came out really pretty low. I think we were asking for 400,000 and we ended up with 100, something like that. So it's hard to do a length of water main with that kind of money. We'll see if we can't figure out a better way to do that when we come to you with the 2021 budget. So the next area is the 2A projects. This is the one that's probably gotten a lot of interest lately because basically when we talk about 2A, we're talking about new things. Water storage tank, new pipeline, a new treatment plant, and a couple of wells. So for the new water storage tank and associated pipelines, roughly a timeline for that is once we give the engineers notice to proceed, which should occur right after the next meeting. First meeting on August 3rd, I'm going to bring a contract forward to you. That's really more of a continuation of the work that Forsgren Engineering did about 3 years ago. We did all preliminary geotech work and the surveys and I can't remember the dollar amount. There's somewhere around 60 grand that was spent with them 3 years ago. Then we came to a halt when the lawsuit occurred. So they're going to bring back a contract revised because now the focus is going to be to build a 2 million gallon tank as opposed to a 1.2 million gallon tank. That's going to drive some of the engineering a little higher than original. But anyway, once notice to proceed is given to the engineers, timeline for that is 21 to 28 months, again, depending on the CDPHE approvals of that. It tells you a little under 2 years to a little over 2 years. And that's to where we have actually flowing water out of the tank to a new. So 21 to 28 months. And again, a reminder, I'll bring that contract to you on the August 3rd meeting. And if you have more questions at that time on that project, I'll be more than happy to give you more details. The next project has changed quite a bit. Well number 10. We originally had this in the budget to do some engineering work this year and then actually construct it next year. But as it turns out, we've had some issues with some of our current wells and even our well number 4 and 5, which is down at the headwaters to the lake, are our two shallow wells. About 30 feet deep, they're alluvium. We spent a lot of money about a year and a half ago redoing the treatment plant to try to get longer run times based on water quality, which worked out really well. The problem now is the water level in that area has dropped. So now those wells are getting 6 to 8 hours in the summer, and then we have to shut them down because they start. So the thought, and this came from after talking to some of the senior water guys we have, is that we should look at drilling well number 10 down on that same site. Well number 10 will be an Arapahoe well, which means it's going to be between 1,000 and probably 1,800. It's going to be in a floodplain, but we have already consulted with CDPHE and the Paso County Department of Public Health, and both of them don't have any objections to it. Can't find any reason why we couldn't do it. They just suggested that the top of the bed be above whatever the projected flood would be based on the floodplain administration. So anyway, the plan right now is to relocate that well to that site and try to move forward with that, hopefully at some time this fall or winter, depending on how we can either get that financed or end up using 2A funds. That's something me and the town manager and others have been talking about, and I'm sure he'll fill you in at some point a little further along. The one of the questions we always have with that well is if we pump that well into that treatment plant, can it take that additional capacity? What we found out this morning was, as it's currently designed, it can't go through the same process that wells 4 and 5 do, but we can bypass the what they call the filtering, the beginning of the pre-filters, and go directly into the pressure vessels, and we have plenty of capacity. So that's been the objective, is if we can basically drill this well down there and save the cost of having to build an associated treatment plant, at least for the next couple of years. That's a much better way of using our limited amount of funds. So we will give you more updates on that as we go along. Right now, I'm looking at trying to bring a contract again at the next meeting for the well design from our consultant, Bruce Lytle. That's kind of what he does, is design wellheads and tell us what depth needs to be and where the springs need to go and things like that. So we'll bring that to you at the next meeting. And then the actual drilling of the well most likely will be bid out because that's the expensive part of the process. But again, we'll have to consult with Mike and figure out the good timing for that. Next part of the 2A presentation here is we have a new well and treatment plant, or at least that was the plan on the property at Cynthia's at Mitchell, which is the same place where I hope to build a public works facility in the future. Again, that will be budgeted most likely 2021 into 2022, depending on how this next year's budget comes along. So that would be an additional well and a treatment plant. And if I remember our build out numbers in 2035, that should be the last major infrastructure that we have to build, unless the town moves forward with annexing additional properties, creating a larger demand on the system. But that project, along with the reuse water coming back through the pipeline from the northern region, that gives us a good amount of water. Right now, we're expecting, going back to that subject, probably in the neighborhood of 200 to 210,000 gallons a day we'd be able to receive through that, which is the equivalent of about a day's supply. We typically go through every day now. So it's a large amount. That water connection comes before, then we may change our plan as for timing of our next well. Well, another issue that just came up as of this morning, without looking at the video, is well number 3, which is one of the 2 wells that are out of service right now. Video that I looked at on that was not very good. It's definitely showing its age. And we found out through looking in the records that that well was actually drilled almost 50 years ago into the ground. So the casing is showing its age. The people that are going to patch things up there and get our pump and motor back in, hopefully within the next week, are going to recommend that you plan for a re-drill as early as next year or 2 years at the most. So we're going to have to build that into our 5-year capital plan and probably look at a drill sooner than later. That will be on the same site, but one of the positive things about this is we may be able to re-drill this well farther away from the road. From the existing well right now kind of causes a little kink in the road as you go around. If we can find a way to abandon that well when the time comes and get the road to move over to straighten out, then the new well would be a little further to the right. I'm talking about the area where the Arlene's Beans is and that Pancrat's building, all that area there. Town owns that strip between the road and that parking lot. So that's something new that we didn't plan on in the short term. I think it was in our long-range plan to refill that well, but the timeline's going to need to be moved up. One of the other things under 2A is, and I only got a couple things, probably long, but I tried to shorten this quite a bit. Is the existing tank that we're under now, we know that's not in the best condition. We got a roof that's deteriorating. We did some temporary repairs over the last couple of years with covers and trying to paint it to keep it from getting worse. I know in some of the talks I've had with Mike recently, we're kind of leaning more towards whether we're going to look at trying to spend money on another engineering study once that tank can come out of service. But being that it's close to 50 years age, it's about the life of a standard concrete water tank. We may look at building another tank right off the go instead of spending, $100,000 on another study to tell us that we need a new tank anyway. So we're still thinking about that and trying to figure out how we can package that with the other things, and come to the board with some good things. Last thing I want to talk about is that interconnect with TriView. One of the meetings we had last week for the Northern Regional Pipeline was that TriView wanted to look at redirecting that pipeline once it comes under the interstate, and instead of connecting where we originally thought, they want to move that connection probably about maybe a half mile further south. And that benefits both of us when they do that. And so that's a good thing. The thing that I guess it's a little frustrating is we don't have a timeline yet, but we're expecting that soon. And then again, just keep in mind that pipeline that's coming all the way from Northgate area is going to have a connection to Denali. And I'll just say something about the Denali Water District is they originally were in this, and then there was a while when they came out, and they expressed an interest on staying with it. And I'm not quite sure where they're going to end up, but the proposed right now, the memo that we have is actually taking two tracks, one if they're in and one if they're out. So that will change other people's costs, and obviously when we come to you with the numbers, that will be probably a worst case scenario, as if there's only 3 of us instead of 4. But like I said, this system is being designed not only to get our return flows back, but it's gonna have the potential to supply any future renewable water. And I know that's Colorado Springs Utilities doesn't want to talk about that yet, but I think when we design the pipeline to feed everybody here, it's going to be oversized for that reason in the future. So I guess if there are any more questions on anything I've discussed, more than happy to answer questions.
Questions from the board?
I have a question, Tom. Where is the interconnect, the original plan for the interconnect with TriView? I don't remember.
Well, when they started the regional talk about a northern regional plan, it was going to come in. Basically, if you drew a line from Higbee Road under the interstate and kept going west, so basically just south of Dirty Woman Creek is where that connection would have been. Now the connection looks like it's going to go in down by the ISO, just north of Teachow Creek,
Okay,
somewhere in that region.
thanks. Just one other question. In regards to the redrill of well number 3, do you have any idea, ballpark, what that looks like in cost?
A ballpark for most wells, that well right now is about 1,000 feet deep. Ballpark in that is probably $1 million. That's how
So-
we kind of judge cost of drilling a new well, unless you're going really deep and you could throw another.
So I don't have all this memorized, just so you know. So are we going to do a workshop in regards to
that's-
being able to,
As soon as the mayor recognizes me, I'm going to go over it.
okay, I'll be quiet.
Additional questions from the board?
Yes, what about well number 8? I heard that one had some issues.
Well, number 8, the latest on that, and keep in mind, this company that we called in, they Applied Ingenuity. They have been over backwards. They pulled drill rigs from active sites to come in because they know the situation we're in. And when the VP of the company is sitting in the video van watching me watch that video, it says a lot about that. So yeah, well number 8, they videoed that over the weekend, I think on Sunday, actually. And the corrosion in that well looks a little heavier than they were expecting. But this afternoon, they were going to do an acid treatment on that and then brush it. So what that'll do is knock anything that's loose off and take it to the bottom, and then they'll neutralize it, and then they'll pump all that stuff out before they reinstall the pump motor and all the new piping. So it's a little worse than what we expected to see, considering we had pulled that well, I think, 4 years ago. But there is a fix for it, and that's the one where we found the pump was seized, but the motor's still good. So the cost for that will be a little less than what I'm going to present to you tonight. Basically, in these resolutions, I gave you the worst case scenario. Not to exceed it. But we'll see where they come in at. They're working both of those simultaneously with 2 different crews. And I don't want to say around the clock because they got to go home and eat and all that. Here early in the morning and getting as much done as they can. They're overnighting some parts for well 3 from Arizona. Should have those tomorrow. Best case scenario, we could have at least well 8 back by Friday. Well 3 probably early next week. Required a little more work on that one. So hopefully we'll be out of this. One of the other things we did this afternoon was we went and talked to some of our heavy users that are on HOAs and large apartment buildings that we know go through a lot of water every night, and asked them if they could just shut off the irrigation at least through the end of this week, give the water guys a little help on trying to build the tank level up. So we tracked it all weekend. We did good on the weekend. We did good on Sunday. We were able to get but now we're just going to see how well tonight goes, see if it made an impact. So we're on it. Mike and me have been trading texts, getting updates every evening, every morning.
I have another question on your well number 9 with the absorption method. What happens to the radium that's absorbed in whatever mechanism that you have?
Well, that media that's put in there is proprietary. So the company that we choose, I think it's going to be WRT Technologies. They will come in once the saturation point is reached. They will come in and physically remove those filters and put 2 new ones in. So there will be a yearly O&M cost associated with that. Once we narrow that down to what our actual cost could be, I think they told us they think those will last 1 year. But we called around to other towns that employ the same technology, the same resin, and they're getting typically about 18 months out of it, depending on their flow rates. So we'll build that cost into the enterprise fund budget. So well meet those. So yeah, they take the whole thing, takes a special license, and then part of the fee you're paying is for them to dispose of it at a government-approved site.
You.
What's being done with the remaining wells, so we don't have any problems? What are we doing to check those so that any pop up?
Well, I'm trying to think about the only wells we haven't had an issue with lately have been 2 of our smaller ones, wells 1 and 2. And since well number 3 has had the issue with the age of the casing, we have a couple of guys looking into what the last video looked like when those wells were pulled and pulling up the age. And if it looks like they're pretty much the same time frame, then we may look at trying to build something into those two as far as the budget goes. Just don't know at this time. We haven't had any issues with wells 1 and 2 yet that we know of. They seem to be pretty consistent. I will tell you that both those wells pump at a lower rate than well number 3. Maybe that has something to do with how long the well can live in the current environment. The higher flow rates, our bigger wells tend to be the most expensive, but they also get the most. They're pumping at several hundred gallons a minute. But we're looking into it. We just don't have an answer yet.
Tom, you mentioned the pipeline coming from CSU through TriView. What was the timeline on that again?
I get a feeling how these things normally work is we're trying to parallel the timeline the same as the sewer interceptor portion of the project. And so they're looking at construction starting in October 2022.
22 and
completing
23.
November of 2023. One of the issues that's always a concern is if we start moving quicker on the water pipeline without getting a firm commitment from Colorado Springs Utilities, then there's an element of risk involved in that because Colorado Springs Utilities obviously is their own governmental entity. If they change their mind before anybody signs anything, then whatever money we spent on that wouldn't do well. So I think that's why this group that we're with now, TriView, Woodmore, and us are really the 3 main players. We're going to push as hard and as quick as we can for them to commit. One of the reports they generated, Colorado Springs Utilities, was that they said that they had changed one of their utility policies to where they're now allowed to enter into 25-year contracts. I think last meeting I was down at Springs Utilities, pre-virus times. Everybody there was looking more like for a 99-year lease. Something would make us, if we're going to spend millions of dollars putting this in the ground, we want some firm commitment that you're going to provide us that water exchange. But that's kind of where we're at now. Hasn't been there's an internal policy that part of their regionalization plan is where they said that right now they changed it so they're at least at a 25-year point. I think they were at much less than that prior to.
Okay. On the new tank, what was the timeline on that?
I believe it was 21 to 28 months from notice to proceed, which I will bring the contract to you on August 3rd. Usually notice to proceed is within 4 or 5 days of that, once we get the signature signed and all that. So probably August 10th would be notice to proceed. So you're looking at August 10th of 21, August. So probably starting construction. Actually, no, that's completed with water running 2 years. So probably sometime in the fall of 2022, we should have water flowing out of the new tank connected to our system.
Okay. Mr. Foreman, you had comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Many of these projects have been planned for years. We met with a finance company today, and we'll meet with a couple others within the next 2 weeks. We discussed the benefits of issuing revenue bonds versus cash funding with 2A funds so that we can get some of these projects done quicker. We're putting together a package that could complete $10 to $15 million worth of projects within 2 years. This was a short update today. When we get the package put together, we will have a board workshop to go into the details and mainly the cost of all these projects to receive direction and prioritize these projects.
So are you looking for a date?
What?
Can you say that last part again? I missed it.
I said, we're going to have a board workshop to go into the details and mainly the cost of all these projects to receive direction and to prioritize these projects.
Okay.
Probably I'd say within the next 2 months, we'd have a workshop on this. We're looking at, and maybe even sooner than that, because if we get direction from the finance companies, the one we met with today said it would be better if we were able to sell the revenue bonds before the election.
My concern is it going to do us any good to get the money quicker if we just to get the project started? Is that what you're saying?
No, what it is today we could get a lower interest rate. So
Right.
If we sell all the revenue bonds today, we can get a lower interest rate.
Okay, so that's the reason behind.
That is a reason behind it. The other one is to get as soon as we get all the design and everything like that, we'll have the money available to start the project.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Okay, that moves us on to resolutions. Resolution 5A, a resolution authorizing the use of water enterprise contingency funds. Mr. Tharnish.
Right, now moving on to the fun stuff. Resolution 24 is a resolution approving the use of contingency funding for emergency repairs to well number 3. Down into the background, and we estimated between 85 to 95,000 based on the initial troubleshooting. Expected duration, again, worst case, 4 weeks. If we can get that water well back online, maybe early next week is the hope. Shorten that timeline a bit. And the funding for it, I don't know whether we're going to come in that range, but that would I put 95 is what we think the worst case for that would be. So any questions on resolution 24?
Questions from the board? This is the one we already discussed in a
Yes.
previous meeting.
This is where we had to get permission to go ahead because they could pull a site from somewhere else, a
Right.
drill rig, and get it over.
Okay, so if there are no questions, I'll look for a motion to approve.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 24-2020, a resolution that authorizes the use of water enterprise contingency funds for emergency repairs to well number 3 pump and motor.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan, would you take roll, please?
Trustee Romanello?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee LeKine?
Yes.
Trustee Unruh?
Yes.
That motion passes 6-0. Resolution 5B, resolution number 2620.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. This resolution is appointing a regular and alternate member to the Planning Commission. After Mitch LeKine resigned as Planning Commissioner when he was elected a trustee, we had one alternate move up to a regular member, and that was Sean White, leaving one open position for an alternate member of the Planning Commission. Martin Trujillo submitted a Planning Commission Board of Adjustment application and resume to the Planning Department. The Planning Department accepted his submission, and he took his oath of office on July 8th, 2020 to the Planning Commission meeting, and we're asking for your approval for him to be a Planning Commissioner, an alternate Planning Commissioner.
I believe previously we used to receive the application. Did I miss that? Did we not?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not send it to the board, but I will do that. I just sent the resolution and his oath of office from Planning Commission, but I can send
Okay.
his resume and his application to the board.
And you can redact any necessary information.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be Ms. Hogan, am I correct? Did we not used to put those with them?
Correct. I did not receive any of those documents prior to,
Okay,
this
that's fine. I'm just making sure that,
but yes, you are correct. Generally, we would present you with the applications, and you would make the appointment, and then we would do the oath of office after applicant.
okay. I don't know if anybody here is interested in seeing it. If everybody's in agreement, I don't believe we need to have you send out this particular one. But for the future, I think some board members would like to see who's applying and what they're. I know that often we don't have enough people to be picky, to consider,
Yeah.
so it's not a big deal. Any questions from the board in regards to this resolution?
No.
Seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
No.
Mr. Romanello, would you like to expand on your comment?
That was a delayed no from when you asked questions. That was a delayed no from when you asked questions.
Thank you.
I love hearing myself 2 minutes later.
I make a motion to approve resolution.
I love hearing 2 minutes later.
I make a motion to approve resolution number 26-2020, a resolution appointing regular alternate.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee LaKine?
Yes.
Trustee Unruh?
Yes.
Trustee Romanello?
Yes. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes. That motion passes 6-0. Resolution number 2720, a resolution authorizing the use of enterprise contingency funds. Mr. Tharnish, your break is over.
Okay, resolution 27-2020 is very similar to resolution 24. This has to do with well number 8, which is a much bigger producer of water for us. Resolution is to approve funds, contingency funds, to effect the repairs for this. Right now, what we know is that this well has a seized pump on it. But what I heard is the motor is good, so that will help save us on cost. And it's just going to take some cleaning. In fact, they're doing the acid cleaning now as we speak. And hopefully have this in service either the end of this week or worst case, I guess, early next week. Any questions on this one?
So this is already working and moving forward.
Yes.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, we have, I think we said well number 3 was going to get paid for out of the Enterprise Water Fund, but then that was depleted because of well number 3. How are we paying for well number 8?
Well, combined, if worst case scenario, both these are set at 95,000, so you're looking at about 190. And I don't have the exact number in front of you. I think the contingency has 140,000 in it.
Okay.
Whatever is needed over the 140 will come out of a different line item in the enterprise fund, whether it's a well maintenance or distribution system or things associated with the well. We have other line items that we could divert funds to if needed. But it will deplete, both these together will most likely deplete the contingency. Oh, I remember now a conversation. We have one project that we've been holding off on with a water department lab office expansion because the preliminary engineering numbers came in higher than we were expecting. So I kind of held off on that for a little bit, and that's got 250,000. So that would be a potential item that we could pay for these repairs if needed.
And this is, the cost here is highest case scenario, worst case scenario.
Yes, to my knowledge, unless something comes up in the next day or two that would require us. I try to fix it so I don't have to come back to you several times to request additional funding. I try to give you the worst case scenario
Cost.
for this.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 27-2020, a resolution that authorizes the use of water enterprise contingency and capital expenditure funds for emergency repairs to well number 8.
We have a motion and a
I
second.
second.
Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Unruh,
Yes.
we are taking roll call vote. Yes. Kind?
Yes.
Trustee Romanella?
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
That motion passes 6-0. Takes us to ordinances. Ordinance number 10, 2020, an ordinance approving a rezone and preliminary planned development site plan for Santa Fe Park. Ms. Flynn.
Good evening. Next slide. Again, this is ordinance 10, 2020 for Santa Fe Park rezone and preliminary PD site plan. Next slide. The vicinity map of the location of Santa Fe Park. Next slide. The project location is situated west of I-25 and east of Old Denver Road and north of Baptist Road. The Santa Fe Regional Trail lies between the site and Old Denver Road. To the north of the site is the approved Connexus project, which proposes a mix of industrial businesses and civic uses. This project site is approximately 65 acres. Next slide. Zone change project summary. The rezone from Regency Park planned commercial development and planned industrial development to planned development. Approximately 50 acres of the 64.7 acre property is part of a larger area between Old Denver Road and I-25 that is zoned under Regency Park PID zone. The remaining 14 acres on the south end of the property is currently zoned Regency Park planned commercial development. Next slide. The zoning standards and criteria. The maximum building height for PCD area is 100 feet. For PID areas is 90 feet. The minimum building setbacks are the same for both zones and require 50-foot setback from I-25, a 25-foot setback from the arterial road, a 20-foot from the collector road, and a 15-foot from the local road. Side and rear setbacks are to be determined by the final PD site plan submittal. Maximum lot coverage is 35% for the PCD zone and 40% for the PID zone. Next slide. The proposed uses are commercial zone, which will be commercial, office, recreational, civic, light industrial, mini storage, excluding distribution center, and multi-use. Commercial and industrial zones, all uses as stated in the commercial zone, industrial, including a distribution center, which could be there. Next slide. The future land use map from the comprehensive plan. Commercial centers. Land use is likely to generate a high number of vehicle trips. Promotes uses that provide goods and services for the region and traveling public. Entertainment complexes, lodging and meeting facilities, large specialty retail establishments. Next slide. Business campus area encourages mixed-use business parks that allow for office, research, and development, commercial accommodations, and educational facilities. Manufacturing, assembly, and fabrication uses are acceptable if activities are contained within a structure and screened from the street from the I-25 corridor. And also parks and recreation and trails are looked in this area from our future land use map. Next slide. The phase one of this project will be the construction of streets, remaining utilities, and the detention pond. The remainder of the development will proceed lot by lot basis, and each lot will have their own final PD site plan. Next slide. Access points. Terrazzo Drive will form the spine road through the development, and it's proposed to add a dual left turn lane from Terrazzo Drive onto Baptist Road. 2 new access points are proposed off of Old Denver Road, La Campanada Drive and Baja Drive. New southbound left turn lanes are proposed on Old Denver Road at both of these access points. Next slide. The Santa Fe Trail crossings. La Campanada Drive and Baja Drive will cross the Santa Fe Trail. The memo of understanding was dated on January 14th, 2008, between El Paso County and Phoenix Bell Associates to allow up to 6 trail crossings. The cost of constructing, maintaining the crossings, including any signage and signalization, shall be paid by the developer and completed in accordance with the county standards and specs. Next slide. These are a list of the referrals who have reviewed and commented on this project. Next slide. The Planning Commission hearing was June 24th, 2020. No one from the public spoke for or against the project. The Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval. Next slide. The Planning Commission recommends approval of Ordinance 10-2020 Santa Fe Park rezone and preliminary PD site plan based on the findings that the proposal complies with all standards and criteria for approval with the following conditions. For the applicant to consider giving pedestrians the right-of-way on the Santa Fe Trail, and the applicant to consider minimizing access points that cross the Santa Fe Trail. Next, Andrea Barlow from NES will present her portion of tonight's presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. Here again. I'll be a bit shorter this time, I promise. Okay, thank you very much. My name's Andrea Barlow with NES, representing the applicant at Phoenix Bell Associates. Next slide. As we've indicated, we're looking at rezoning the property from PCD and PID to a PD development and with a preliminary PD site plan. Next slide. Site location, north of Baptist Road, so kind of sandwiched there in between Old Denver Road and the interstate with the Valero gas station on that southeast corner. Next slide. Existing zoning, as Debbie explained, is a mix of PID with PCD, which is commercial zoning on that south portion of the property. The maximum heights allowed in the PCD are 100 feet and in the PID 90 feet. And the code actually requires a property that is previously approved for PD development to be rezoned. They won't honor that existing zoning if you want to make any changes, so we had to rezone to PD. And that's why we're here today. Next slide. Oh, next slide, yeah. So, sorry. So here are the existing zoning permitted uses. I'm not going to go through them. I'll pause slightly for you to look on them. This is what's allowed in the PCD zone. That's the commercial zoning. So a wide range of commercial uses, some civic uses, and some just general kind of community uses as well. Next slide. A slightly shorter list of permitted uses in the PID zone. Our plan is to continue with all those approved uses, just and to try and reflect pretty much the existing zoning. So next slide, please. And here's our plan. So the green area, this I've turned you around a little bit here. So I-25 is on the upper part of this slide at Old Denver Road on the south. It's just easy to get the details on. Tract B on the southwest corner is the proposed detention pond, which will detain all the stormwater runoff of the entire property. Tract A on the north side is actually the creeks. There's No Name Creek along that northern boundary, and that is protecting that drainage area. There's a slope down to the creek, so that will be retained as an open space tract. And then we're proposing to divide the site into various lots. The pink area is the area that we will propose for commercial only to reflect the existing PCD zoning. And then the purple lots are indication of uses that could be industrial or commercial. We would see some sort of gradual transition between the commercial and industrial uses. What we are showing here in terms of the lot configuration really is just a preliminary conceptual layout. It may change, it probably will change. I could see some of those being combined into larger lots to accommodate bigger uses. Next slide. So the proposed uses, we've got general categories which reflect the approved uses in the existing zones. So you have the commercial areas and indicating those uses that I mentioned: commercial, civic, office, light industrial, then going into a little bit more heavier industrial in the industrial area and including distribution center. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I'd just like to put, sorry, can you go back to that? I just want to pause on the multi-use. What we're considering there is the live-work type units. We've seen a demand for that, and generally in these areas residential hasn't been allowed, but we wanted to be able to incorporate that type of facility, that a live-work unit where you would have a garage or office space on the first floor and maybe a unit on the upper floor. That we've seen those as becoming increasingly popular. So that's the type of development we would anticipate with a multi-use. No particular guarantee it's going to be here, but we wanted to facilitate that if there was interest. Next slide. So just talk a bit about access. Debbie went through this, but I wanted to do it with a bit of visual context. So this is the proposed access from the site of Terrazzo Drive onto Baptist Road. Terrazzo already exists on the south side to service the pilot and the future development to the south. So we're aligning with Terrazzo, and there will be a dual left turn from Terrazzo onto Baptist Road. That ultimately, when it's signalized, there is planned signalization there, and in the interim, that would just be a single turn lane. Next slide. So La Campana Drive is our southernmost access on Old Denver Road, and that is proposed to be combined with the existing northern access to the trailhead. These access points were discussed at length with the County Parks Department and town staff in terms of the appropriate spacing of the access points in Old Denver Road and the combining of that access in order to limit the crossings on of the trail. So that would be that combined access point there helps to reduce one potential access onto Old Denver Road and one potential crossing of the trail. And next slide. And the Baja Drive is the northern access on Old Denver Road, and as noted, we are going to have southbound left turn lanes at both those access points. Next slide. So just Santa Fe Trail crossing, as Debbie mentioned, there is an MOU in place between El Paso County and Phoenix Bell Associates. Now, Phoenix Bell originally owned the majority of land from Baptist Road up to 2nd Street on the west side of the highway between Old Denver Road and the highway, other than one parcel that's adjacent to 2nd Street. So that in its entirety allowed 6 crossing points. As you may recall, if for those who are on the board, but for those who weren't, there's a 23-acre parcel right in the middle there, really, that is Connexus Phase 1, and that already has 1 crossing point. So this project, the 65 acres, will take 2 of those 6 crossing points, and the remaining 3 will serve the area to the north. Next slide. So the crossing point has already, this is the design of the crossing that was approved with the Connexus Phase 1, and the intent is to reflect that crossing design per the county specification at the 2 crossing points proposed on Old Denver Road. Next slide. The comprehensive plan shows us as commercial center and business campus, which really focuses heavily traveled uses on the south side of the project, which is consistent with our proposal to concentrate commercial in that area. And then more of a mixed-use business park. Obviously, we're going a little bit more industrial, consistent with the existing zoning, but it does recognize manufacturing, assembly, and fabrication uses are appropriate, and obviously any outdoor activities will be screened per the code requirements. And it also shows park recreation and trails. We have retained that area in green there. That is the northern part of the site adjacent to the creek as open space. Next slide. Some more specific policies are those which encourage a wider array of land uses, moving away from single-use developments to more mixed-use developments. In particular, opportunity LUE, which is to capitalize on the 3 I-25 interchanges for tax-generating uses, so that would be consistent with that goal. And just generally in opportunity EDA to allow Monument to serve the growing Front Range population as a destination. Next slide. Just briefly, the preliminary PD site plan review criteria is what we always go back to. So we're providing open space as appropriate, I would say, to the function of the project as a primarily commercial industrial park on the north end, and protecting that natural drainage. We are adjacent to an existing trail system, so we're providing connections to that through the development. Clearly, we'll have a positive fiscal impact by bringing commercial and industrial development. And it's a mixed use. We're encouraging a variety of uses on the site, trying to broaden slightly the commercial and industrial zoning that exists. And there really aren't any surrounding residential areas, so our buffering requirements aren't extensive, but we are providing a setback from the trail, from I-25 and from Baptist Road, and providing internal circulation with the road system identified. Phasing, as Debbie identified, will be the utilities and roads, and then following with the development. Utility service is provided by TriView, and they're already the water line is already in. A gas line has been extended to the west of I-25 through a collaboration between various landowners in this area. And then just design and architecture, that really will be dealt with at a more detailed plan stage. And the site really doesn't have any major environmental characteristics other than the creek, and we're protecting that. And the plan's consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. Next slide. So in summary, we think we address all the relevant criteria. The municipal code actually requires us to rezone. We are proposing uses and development standards that are consistent with the existing zoning. It conforms to the comprehensive plan land use designation and policies, and it meets all the preliminary PD site plan review criteria. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board at this time before we open up the public hearing? Okay.
Old Denver Road, you indicated that expecting high traffic section.
High traffic.
Yeah, I saw somewhere in your high traffic.
I didn't mention high traffic. I mean, we have a traffic study that was presented with the project that incorporated estimates of traffic for the development. I would anticipate the majority of traffic utilizing the ultimately signalized intersection at Terrazzo and Baptist coming off the highway. I actually think and the traffic study supports this, that the traffic that would use Old Denver Road would be much less significant than the main entrance to the project. But I'm a little unsure about the reference to high traffic.
I believe it was in reference into retail traffic, or
where I mentioned high numbers of vehicles were for the commercial center, and that's only if this is just a commercial center, but it's going to be more than just a commercial center, because it's going to be a commercial center as well as a business. It could be a commercial center. It could be a business campus with all those uses. It's not definite of what those uses are going to be right now, but commercial centers generally have higher vehicle traffic.
Okay, so is there anything in the planning that indicates that Old Denver will be expanded to support traffic?
There will be some expansion of Old Denver to accommodate the turn lanes required to get into the access points. So the southbound left turn lanes, and there will also probably be northbound right turn lanes. But the actual widening of Old Denver Road beyond a 2-lane road at this point, it may be triggered with future development that's been considered in the context of the overall development along this section, but there's nothing specific in the traffic.
Mr. Foreman, can you?
Yes, I can
represent-
expand upon that. Commissioner LaKine, me and the mayor met with one of the, and I said commissioner, I'm sorry, trustee. That's, I know. Going to 2 board meetings in 1 week. We met with one of the developers out there, and one of the ideas that we came up with was placing this in a public improvement district, and that would help us fund the widening of Old Denver Road. And they felt like that was a very positive step. They're looking for other funding sources to be able to fund some of their projects. And so in combination with some of their ideas and our ideas, I think we can probably look towards working together in a partnership to widen Old Denver Road.
Do we own Old Denver Road, or is that the county property?
We own all of it.
Okay.
Yes, they own Santa Fe Trail and we own the road.
And I believe we already had planned to expand it at some point, correct?
Right, we just need funding for that. And so the public improvement district is a tool that we'd be able to use with the developer to help fund that.
Okay. Trustee LaKine, does that answer your question?
I was thinking county commission. Had to clean that up somehow.
Okay, at this point, I'll open it up to public comment. Mr. Anderson, do we have anybody online? Ms. Hogan, Ms. Flynn, do we have anybody in the hallway that you can see waiting? Okay. Okay. Then we will close the public hearing portion of this hearing. And we will bring it back to the board for further discussion or additional questions or motion.
I make a motion for ordinance number 10/2020, an ordinance approving rezoning and preliminary planning development site plan for Santa Fe Park.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Please move on, Ms. Hogan.
I
Yes.
can't hear Miss Hogan at all.
Yeah, neither can I. I don't know who she called on, but I can't hear her.
I can't hear Miss Hogan at all.
Yeah, neither can I. I don't know who she called on, but I can't hear her.
Trustee Romanello, Trustee Unruh, please hang on one moment.
Trustee Romanello?
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Unruh? Yes. Yes.
Was that everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Seemed like we were missing somebody. That motion passed 6-0. Ordinance number 11-2020, an ordinance approving final plat for Sanctuary Point, filing number 7. Ms. Flynn.
Next slide. Ordinance 11, 2020, final plat for Sanctuary Point, filing number 7. Next slide. Map is the vicinity map. Next slide. 57.625 acres of Phase 2 of Sanctuary Point. Phase 2 final PD site plan was approved in March 2018 with lots 56. This is a lot of 56 lots, 2 tracks, and 4 streets. The lots range in size from 9,800 square feet to 2.306 acres. The tracks will be owned and maintained by Triview Metro District. The plat is consistent with the PD site plan, and all applicable code standards are met. Next slide. And this is a zoomed in area of the plat. Next slide. Lots A and B are inclusive. It's open space, pocket park, trails, buffer, mailboxes, signage, landscaping, public utilities, and drainage, which is about 42% of the total area. And then the 56 lots is about 49% of the total area. Next slide. And these are the referrals who reviewed and commented on this project. Next slide. At the Planning Commission hearing on June 24th, 3 members of the public had questions and concerns to the applicant. The concerns were regarding about the topography and how the homes and sightlines will be determined by Higbee Estates and who makes the decision of where the homes are built. One resident asked if her and her husband can request where a home is located. Concerns with the sightlines of homes and if the existing trails will have any fencing between Higbee Estates. The Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval. Next slide. Planning Commission recommendation recommends approval of ordinance 11-2020, final plat of Sanctuary Point, filing number 7, based on the findings that the proposed development complies with all standards and criteria for approval. Lauren is here to answer any questions as well.
Can you go back to the public comments and elaborate on them? Were they addressed and what were they necessarily referring to?
You want me to take it?
Okay, that's fine.
Sure. Lauren Moreland, I'm one of the vice presidents at Classic Homes and the project manager of Sanctuary Point. And so we had 3 residents from Higbee Estates, which is due north of Sanctuary Point. And I think their lots were actually adjacent to what we're calling filing 7 here. And it all revolved around view corridors and kind of protecting sight lines, it sounded like, from their perspective. Filing 7, especially on this north end, we made numerous concessions as we worked through the PD site plan to approval in regards to the connectivity of the trail, 50-foot buffer between Sanctuary Point lots and Higbee Estate boundary line. And so walk them through that really along that particular line that the topography is really going to dictate where the home placement is. It's very steep on some of those lots. Obviously, we'll grade the roads in, but there's certain areas there where a home is, can't say not constructible, but it would be difficult and I don't think appropriate, some of the locations that may have been requested. So I respectfully declined on the record and said that obviously when we have a customer that chooses that lot, any one of the 3 builders up there, that we would meet the clients on the lot and walk them through home placement based on topography.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, is that northern edge there, is that Higbee Road? It's not labeled on the
No,
maps.
that's the southern boundary of Higbee Estates. And so Higbee Road is probably another mile, maybe mile plus north of there, of the line you're seeing.
Okay, so I'm having trouble understanding how the traffic's going to flow in this area.
So as you recall, one of the conditions back in March of 2018, I don't think you were on the board at that time, but a condition of approval for PD Site Plan 2 was the connection of Sanctuary Rim Drive, which connects on the east end at Baptist Road, and it goes west. And we actually had to gain a public access easement from Goodwin Knight to build and construct that 1,100 feet of road from the northern boundary of Promontory Point, where Glen Eagle had dead-ended for a few years, and made that connection point through Home Place Ranch to connect to Sanctuary Rim Drive. And that gave us 2 points of access there.
Okay, so you got Sanctuary Rim Drive is one point of access. What's the other one?
Well, you've got 2 access points off Sanctuary Rim Drive. You've got the easterly portion, which connects to Baptist Road. The west portion eventually connects to Glen Eagle Drive.
Okay.
Other questions from the board? Okay. This is a public hearing item, so I will open it up to the public. Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against this item at this time? Ms. Flynn, still nobody in the hallway? Okay. At this time, I'll close the public hearing portion of this hearing, of this ordinance, and bring it back to the board for further discussion or a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 11/2020 and ordinance approving a final plat for Sanctuary Point, filing number 7.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee LeKind? Trustee Unruh?
Yes.
Trustee Unruh?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Romanella?
Yes.
I'll throw in a yes because we got kind of mixed up.
Yes.
And Jamie, we did hear your yes. That motion passed 6-0. This brings us to our public comment portion of the agenda. Mr. Anderson, do we have any public comment at this time? Okay, please let me know if something comes up. Board authorization items, joint board meeting with TriView's Board of Directors, proposed for August 26th. Is there any questions or concerns from the board about that date? Any conflicts? What is the 26th? I would assume it would be after business hours, correct? So we're assuming after 5:30 p.m. Ms. Hogan, will you go ahead and move forward with arranging that?
Yes.
The other specified board authorization item is resolution number 25-2020. A resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Monument referring a ballot issue. Mr. Foreman, would you like to speak on that, or?
Yes, Mayor and Board. At this time, we'd request a postponement of Resolution 25-2020 until August 17th. Further, we'd request that the Board of Trustees have a workshop to review the ballot language prior to staff presenting the resolution on August 17th to the Board of Trustees.
Okay, so as a board, we need to set a workshop date to work on that you said prior to August 17th, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would board members be interested if we did a hour-long workshop prior to the meeting on August 3rd? That would leave us enough additional time for any other additional meetings or workshops needed. Correct. 5:30 to 6:30 will be a workshop, 6:30 on. How does the August 3rd agenda look at this point?
Debbie, do you know how many you have on there? You have two. I think it's gonna be pretty quick.
Two ordinances?
Ordinance.
I will have two resolutions also.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a meeting in a long time. I had to fill in for last time.
Yeah. So
Okay, so
looks like 4 items on there so
Okay.
far.
can we, if at all possible, not add anything to that agenda at this point?
I've got a meeting, I think, day after tomorrow. We will make that
Okay.
a direction.
Trustee Romanello, do you have any comments or questions in regards to moving this item to a workshop?
No, I was just gonna say not to have any presentations then on the 3rd.
I think we're all in agreement that no presentation other than the two ordinances that are due that day.
Okay,
And the 2 resolutions that Tom has.
And the two resolutions. Trustee Unruh?
Yeah, that's fine. That works for me.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Thornish, I wasn't saying that you didn't have a presentation. It just usually isn't as in-depth as the ordinance presentations. Mr. Foreman, do you feel like you have your direction on this item?
Yes, sir. We will have you a new version of the resolution prior to that workshop so that you can review that prior to the workshop.
Okay. And also any pending presentation by the police chief or the police department?
Yes, sir. He'll make a presentation at that workshop, and we'll try to get that to you prior to that workshop also.
Yeah, even if it's a day before.
Definitely.
Do we have any other board authorization items by staff or board members? It's not a dated board authorization item, but I think most of the board would be in agree. We are not enforcing any mask wearing throughout town unless a business owner calls and requests help with a trespassing call?
I'll let the town attorney address that, and the chief of police, and then I'll back them up on that real quick.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I think there have been some concerns regarding trespassing and various ordinances related to the governor's most recent order. The concern that I think we have is that there is no specific town ordinance requiring mask wearing, and it would not be trespassing on city streets to not be wearing a mask or be indoors and not be wearing a mask. That's not a violation of any monument code. I don't believe it would necessarily be required to tell the police not to enforce a law that doesn't really exist from the town of Monument's perspective.
Okay, well, my point being is we are only going to enforce if we get a call from a business owner saying this person is trespassing by means of mask wearing.
Just like we would at any other time they call
Any other trespass.
us about trespassing. Is that correct,
Okay.
chief?
Yes, so basically, if an owner would call us, we would evaluate the situation. We would handle it as a trespass only, but then we may have to even reach out beyond that to our legal advisor if they're trespassing somebody with a special need, such as an ADA, something like that. Typically, what we plan on doing is educating, very successful with monument educating, tons of positive feedback from the community, educating. One thing we may have to do is forward some of the complaints to the Department of Health for their follow-up. That'd probably be the extent of it.
Complaints as in?
As in a business that just is not enforcing it because there's a requirement on their end. So we would probably handle that through the civil portion.
Why would we have anything to do with that?
If we got a call. Yeah. If we got a call, somebody demanded that, we do something saying, hey, we would either give them the Department of Health or forward it.
I would like to see if we can further explore that. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think we have that requirement.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think the issue comes up that there are a number of exceptions to the mask wearing ordinance. So if I'm speaking into the microphone, that's one, or if I am medically unable to tolerate a mask, or if I have some sort of hearing impairment, or I have something like that. I think the problem that we're going to run into attempting to enforce anything like this is that we are not equipped to be asking or permitted to be asking about people's medical conditions.
HIPAA laws.
So that our concern becomes a privacy issue, becomes handling of people's medical concerns. And I think that's where perhaps sending it to a health agency, if there's a continuing concern that a business is maybe not doing it, it would not be something a monument is equipped to do. Could refer the individual who's concerned to the appropriate agency that could address it appropriately.
Our major focus on this is education. It's not about writing tickets. It's not about putting people in jail or anything like that. It's about education. And so that's where we stand as a police chief, as a town manager, and as the town attorney. We are focused on educating, and that's what we're going to do.
My concern would be, and I know it's very few people in the community, but resident A calling the chief saying, well, Bob's business isn't wearing masks, run over there and arrest them or, report them without reason to report them.
I think if that occurs, like the chief said, we would report them to the CDPHE, to the county health department. And that's our
Without
requirement.
validating it first?
Well, yes, he would validate it. He would go out there and validate it.
Okay.
Definitely.
I think they're looking at that more as a licensing issue than a law enforcement issue. So when I say the referral, we're not in a hurry to run out and issue any.
Yeah.
We've been 100% supportive of local commerce However, I think the guidance from the health department is they're looking at it from the licensing perspective, more so than the business license, that is.
So they're threatening to revoke licenses if they don't comply, is that what you're saying?
From what I've seen in this county specifically, they're in an education mode as well. So I think for the most part, all of us have stayed in the education mode. I think we've gotten some direction from the district attorney on this issue, which would certainly support a evaluation of what we're doing. So I don't foresee any issues
I can't hear the chief at all.
for education by our troops. So far, it's been very successful.
I can't hear the chief at all.
I said we're going to continue with the education, which has been extremely successful.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think to the chief's point, the major, I think, effective way to address most of these concerns is through the health department and licensing from the state and the county for businesses if the state wants to enforce it.
Just want to clarify, this is the health department that does not know where Monument is, correct?
That may be true, sir.
Any other board authorization items? Any questions on the town manager report? Okay, Board of Trustee comments. Do we have any Board of Trustee comments? Okay, I have a few comments. I think it falls under the chief as far as code enforcement and Mr. Tharnish. I've been down to the lake several times this weekend. We are having a problem with people parking inappropriately in the wrong places. It was very difficult to get around. My question is, can we put signage up where people are not supposed to park and have our code enforcement officer shift some sort of hours to where he is there during some high traffic times? And my question is the feasibility of this, and then we'll look to the board for further direction on it.
First thing I'll tell you, Mr. Mayor, is, and I think we're going to most likely start tomorrow, we've been acquiring a large collection of rather car-sized boulders. And we're going to line the upper access road where people have been known to park so that nobody's going to be able to park anywhere there other than in the parking spots or at the very south end where it opens up really wide. But then they're limited on space there too. But we're going to, the areas that we know are a problem, we're going to, and I don't know how many it's going to take. I'm guessing maybe 20 or 30 more of those boulders, kind of with similars on the shoreline. And we're going to put them in such a way that the only way people are going to come to there, they're going to have to keep driving, because if they stop and try to park, they're going to block the entire lane. Then it becomes either the police can handle it or the people get tired of waiting, somebody's blocking the way, and I think that'll kind of take care of itself. But we do have access to a large amount of boulders for free. All we have to do is haul them. So we started hauling them today, and I'll probably have enough tomorrow to start placing them.
Okay.
And that's kind of our immediate plan, is to try to limit where people can park just by physically putting something in their way.
It was terribly tight getting out of there from where you were talking about turning around area, boat area, going back up to the main road with cars lined, sometimes one on one side and then staggered to the other. So
yeah.
I think your answer, if you guys feel that's going to be effective, negates my question to you.
Well, the signage question comes up quite a bit, but the problem with that is, and I know me and the chief and I think Commander Hudson, is that we get to a point where we have, 15 or 20 signs down there that nobody looks at anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to become very, it's just going to look bad. You get that many signs every couple of feet telling people what they already know when they don't listen. It's hard to, where do we stop putting signs there? We thought about putting a stop sign at the gate with a big rule sign down there, making them read it. But then again, when I asked the question, can you enforce if someone runs a stop sign? The answer is you can't get them for running a stop sign. You can only get them for because it's a recreation. So if they run into somebody, then it could be careless or they classify that. But even putting a stop sign at the gate onto the lake is not enforceable because of its status as a park or recreation area, not a road.
Not a city. It's not a city street.
Would it be beneficial maybe to do the digital signs for, I would guess, just the next 2 weekends before supposedly kids are going back to school?
And Mayor, we, is this Andrew? I know. So we have the rangers down there now also assisting us, so we can actually give them more specific direction and keeping certain areas cleared out. I think we're giving 5 hours each Saturday and Sunday for the next at least 2 or 3 weekends. So we can hit it from that angle also.
What are the times?
I think it's 12 to 17 on 12 to 5.
Okay. Do you know that where I'm talking about as far
By
as?
the boat ramp?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Coming out after,
Yes, and we've got some citizen complaints up there as well. So we've been already focused on it to some degree in between calls, but we will give the rangers that special direction.
Okay.
I thought you were here just in time for adjournment.
Oh, hey.
So it sounds like these items are already in the works and there's no reason for board direction on anything with
We've
that.
been working on this
Okay.
for months.
Thank you.
You bet.
The other thing I would like to comment on is just updating the board on our allotted CARES Act funds going back out to the community. This process has taken longer than we expected, but we will be able to fulfill about 30 businesses' requests for financial assistance. Myself and Madeline has been doing almost all the administrative work and been doing great at it. The committee that we put together has been functioning great. Jim has been chairing that committee, and we are actually getting close to wrapping it up, and checks should start going out to the small businesses next week. So just wanted to update on that. And thank you to Madeline and Jim for doing so much on that and the committee itself. When we're done with this, at some point we'll bring the committee in so everybody can meet who was on the committee and who helped out with this project. And that's all I had. Any other board comments? Seeing none, I'll look for an adjournment. Motion to adjourn. For a motion to adjourn. All in favor?